Greetings, greetings,
Hello.
everyone. Welcome to Mad Poet Podcast. I am your host, the Mad Poet, otherwise known as Alex Murder. Um, Looking forward to unpacking things. It's another day to speak art and life experiences, as they say. Art imitates life, life imitates art. Mm. But great to be here. Hope everyone is well. We have a special guest on today. Um, Quite the resume. Multimedia artist, educator, specializing in photography, sound design, animation, and AI creativity. Um, Looking forward to tapping into that. I'm author of the Beginner's Guide to Procreate Dreams, and I love the title, by the way. Mr. David
You
Miller,
know,
welcome to my poet podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I want to specify that Procreate Dreams is a animation app
Yeah.
on the iPad, and it's related to Procreate because I did a podcast where an author wasn't aware of that, and they thought it was like a sexual thing. If only, you know.
Well, I'm sure the audience will appreciate the differentiation there. You know,
Mhm.
um, Without further ado, I just have something to share. Quote for the day, or should I say, this episode, and then we can further our endeavors into the conversation. Self-value like walking a tightrope that seldom goes unsteady, with the folly and the medley trying to keep my synchronicity, growing with the folly that tends to throw smoke screens at me, but never fear in the premise I am prone to never miss. At least my ambitions is to be growth through the bones, thus they mutate with me, looking in the mirror like a beanstalk growing with its clearest plea. Jack and the beanstalk, thus I can see more. Extra highlight for me now. I look into the great beyond like I can take me there. I can solve the nightmares like Times Squares with a mapping key, knowing what ingredients makes me. Thus, if I disintegrate like the wind, I can reassemble. See, just a quote for today. Yes, as we were saying, back to the conversation. Um, I was very curious about your journey. What led you to be this person that decided to go down this route of being an artist and doing innovative things like AI? What was your inspiration at the beginning of your journey?
As a child, it would have been things like the documentary making of Star Wars that came out shortly after Return of the Jedi or the Muppets. I grew up in the 80s
Yeah,
and came of age in the 90s. And it was, I think of it as this like magical time where technology just like grew in leaps and bounds. And the kind of stuff that was really creative and imaginative was supported,
yeah,
maybe more so than it is today and more so than it was previously. Because when I think of the previous generations, like the 60s and 70s, it was more like raw and direct.
yeah.
And I think part of the reason for that is because they didn't have the means to make imaginative science fiction, fantasy,
Mm,
puppeteering, animation kind of things. And you didn't have, without the internet, you didn't have as much cross-pollination between cultures
yeah,
as you got in the 90s. Funny to think of the 90s as this time where we were like, oh, all information that's true and relevant is going to elevate, and
yeah,
people are going to stop being
yeah.
superstitious and into conspiracies and things like that. And the opposite has happened, of course.
Mm,
But
true.
growing up in those times, a lot of the creators themselves, the Jim Hensons and the George Lucases and Peter Jackson and
Yeah,
Guillermo del Toro and writers like Alan Moore,
mm,
what they were doing was successful.
yeah,
And oh, and David Lynch, of course. It really made you feel like if you were kind of like a dreamy, uh, creative person,
Yeah.
it was a path for you. And
Mm.
it felt like that all kind of leapfrogged the business end of whatever creative industry you're into. So I drawing was first. Photography came second because I couldn't draw as realistically as I wanted to. And I
Yeah.
also saw an exhibit by a very famous photographer named Sebastião Salgado. He does like migrants and workers, and he had photographed the genocide in Rwanda, but he had done all this very humanitarian stuff that looked very epic in scale.
Yeah.
And in a way, he is the visual equivalent of like a U2 or Bruce Springsteen or
Mm.
Midnight Oil, all the sort of progressive bands of that era.
Yeah.
And um, a little bit after photo school and getting involved in teaching and stuff, I always liked music and always tried to make music, especially influenced by Trent Reznor,
Yeah.
because he did a lot of stuff with tape loops, and Me Beat Manifesto and Papa Weed itself are these bands that I grew up loving that were all sample based. And I did a lot of that up to a point, but in the mid 2010s, it was really when Adobe forced you essentially to pay for all their applications on a monthly
Yeah.
basis. I said, I'm going to learn all of it then because I'm paying for it.
Yeah.
And that opened a lot of new avenues for me, even though, it was one of those things in the creative industry that people really disliked. And to
Mm.
this day, they
Yeah.
super dislike the fact that they have to constantly pay for access to these things. It just made me feel like there was a lot of ways to integrate various interests into one thing. And the more mobile technology has allowed for like better filmmaking. And in the
Yeah.
case of Procreate Dreams, it's all on my iPad. The um, the reasons for me to bring in other media besides photography, yeah, like the reasons not to do it have fallen away.
Mm.
If you were just a photographer and you wanted to, showcase your work and build an audience on Instagram, you're forced to make videos.
Yeah.
So why not make them really interesting? And then why not make them really stand out if you know how to do music and sound design and unique editing and work in animation? And
Yeah.
the AI stuff is pretty recent, but much like when Adobe forced us to learn all these other apps, if you wanted to justify paying for them, AI is being integrated into every single, virtually, not Procreate or Procreate Dreams, but virtually every interface you have on the internet
Yeah.
involves AI. And I think everybody who maybe they have, concerns that their work is being stolen or that they're going to be put out of a job, like that's all very real,
Mm.
but it doesn't change the world you're living in.
It doesn't. No.
And if you're an early adopter to any of these technologies or any of the things like Procreate Dreams or some of the Adobe apps that were new when I really got into it, you can take this opportunity and not only be good at it and gain an audience of like-minded creative people who
Yeah.
don't want to see it make junk, but want to see it make cool things.
Mm.
And you also have a chance to influence how the industry, you know, shapes. Um,
Absolutely. Game changer. That would be
yeah,
you, you know?
especially with music, because of all the creative things, I think like making a movie and having all the moving parts from costumes to acting to lighting, it's very difficult to get all of that to gel. You'll have
Mm.
to excuse the Los Angeles noise. Um,
Don't worry about it.
Music is not as difficult. It's only a set of wavelengths and waveforms,
Yeah.
and so getting it to sound in what we would describe as like a soulful or human way, or like a
Mm.
very bizarre way, or to make soundtracks to your video pieces that are as rich and evocative as a full orchestra,
Mm.
um, is extremely possible. And everybody who says that, well, nobody will want to listen to AI music, I defy them to listen to the pop charts anyways, which is, hyper processed, made up of samples from sample libraries and auto-tuned, and has very little, if any, of the original artist input into it.
Yeah. I mean, I think in this day and age, it's hard to say that there's not some kind of computerized interface that's helping us or aiding us with our creation of music or just different art, regardless. You get what I mean, over the board. Even if it's 90% really just authentically you, like,
Mhm.
to do the rest of it, there's going to be certain things here and there, moderatively speaking, that would aid you to kind of create this fine tuned art, whether it's audio or visual. It's just the age we live in. So, you just,
I-
as long as moderate yourself and just keep within the guidelines. I think you know it's just what it is. And like you said, you either adapt, evolve, or you get left behind.
yeah, and I think every time there's a new technology, it's funny when you go back in history and you find out that the printing press
Mm.
was, people were like, not that printing press thing, not that, that mass production of words. We need our monks to, dedicate their lives
Yeah.
in a monastery writing these things by hand. In the folk era, 1960s, one of the biggest controversies was Bob Dylan playing an electric guitar
Mm.
at a folk fest, and they were stunned. And Pete Seeger, a really famous folk musician, tried to pull the plug on Bob Dylan because he dared to use an electric guitar.
Yeah.
And anytime there's something where someone says, "Well, social media, there's no way you can make an authentic human connection. Those people aren't your friends. Those are like just people you know online." Like each new generation has integrated it into their lifestyle,
Very much
and
so.
their digital friends are or people that they've met through gaming and other ways that kind of feel alien a little to me. All these romantic connections are mostly done through online dating now.
Yeah.
Just humanity adapted, and humanity is going to adapt to AI in ways that we can't even predict.
Very true.
Everything with the internet was like not predictable by the people or smartphones and so forth. So I think that it is really important that we speak to the times we live in, and quality control of all technology gets better and better, but the mentality that this has no soul or whatever, I mean, that's kind of like a 4x5 photographer, the big accordion cameras, saying because that way of capturing an image has all this detail and it's rich, it's therefore more soulful, and it just uses natural light going through a thing. There's no mechanical, I'm sorry, there's no electronic parts to it. There's mechanical parts, of course, but none of us are using 4x5 cameras today because they're big and cumbersome and unwieldy. And in the same, talking about the music industry, yes, there were great artists who had years of their lives to dedicate to their craft, just slugging away in complete poverty
Yeah.
and paying thousands of dollars and
Mm.
working with producers, sometimes ones with guns and stuff, or producers who are like predatory towards the female artists,
Yeah.
and um and developing heroin addictions and all this stuff. And it's like AI means that's not necessary,
True.
for the sanity for the sanity and the lifestyle of artists that you want to respect and admire. They should not have to sacrifice their lives and ruin their families and, you know, get addicted to things to make the good art that we want from them.
Mm.
And you can shortcut a lot of issues
Yeah.
in filmmaking. You could, if you were a visionary filmmaker of the past, you had to go out and find funding for everything, and either you're going to gangsters or you're
Mm.
going to like well-established producers who have really bad reputations, like your Harvey Weinsteins and so forth. And then your vision gets compromised and you're
Yeah.
complicit in whatever their criminal activities are. Another option is crowdfunding, which is sort of like going with your hat in hand to whatever fan base you have. And
Mm.
now a third option is you can lower your costs dramatically, and maybe
Yeah.
even your day job allows you to produce a movie in much hyphenated time than it took in the past.
Mm.
So a lot of potential, I think, for an independent creator. If you're somebody in sort of entrenched in a established industry, it looks more like you're out of a job.
It's interesting. I suppose I was curious about something else, but we can touch on it later on. Um, so just let's just go into the whole AI driven art. Is there something um pivotal that we should really know, characteristically speaking, about this route of or this option of creating art? Is it enhancer? Is it like a primary way of creating, just sort of developing your vision, or is it just an aid? You know, what is it exactly? This thing that you've created.
So for music, because I think Suno, the one that I use, is pretty advanced, it's allowing me to create the vision of a music project that I've always wanted to have, which is a female singer
Yeah.
that has like a very singular voice, kind of in the realm of like a Madonna or Sinead O'Connor, but sung with more dissonant music, things that are a little more like aggressive or surreal.
Mm.
So if I was to characterize that project, which is called Magdalena, and my daughter is Magdalena, so um,
Sticks.
it is equal measures 80s dream pop, 90s breakbeat and trip hop, uh,
Yeah.
garage punk aesthetics. It's as if Madonna was fronting Killing Joke with
Mm.
the rhythm section of like a Pop Weight Itself, Nine Inch Nails, Beastie Boys sort of thing. And the lyrics are all related to a lot of my day jobs have been in behavioral health. So I've worked in mental hospitals and
Okay.
drug rehabs um, and just as being an artist and working with a lot of art models and traveling around, like I've had many weird experiences and
Yeah.
currently living by the ocean
Nice.
and going through the sort of hazing anyone gets when they move to Los Angeles,
Yeah.
where you lose all your money and your vehicles and all that stuff. Like uh, I felt like I had a lot of stuff to put into music. Now I've tried working with other ethereal female singers in the past,
Yeah.
and the project usually went about 2 years, and we never got past the demo stage. And the lyrics were because they were like younger people in their 20s. They didn't have a lot of life experience outside of like their relationships. They
Mm.
all were, I'm in love, I'm breaking up. I'm in love, I'm breaking, And
Yeah.
I'm closer to 50 and I just do not think that way anymore. And I don't want to listen to music like that, much like in the 60s when the Beatles were beginning, they all the songs were about love, then Bob Dylan came out and then they switched to having like relevant
Yeah.
society issues. And more to the point though, a lot of times people make music or get in deep into it because they're not hearing the sound they want to hear
Mm.
on Spotify or the radio or what they could buy. Every artist, even their favorite artists, have like one little compromise thing, and they'll get a new album by a favorite artist and be like, "Ugh, why is the guitar so low? This needs a little
Yeah.
more energy. And the beats are kind of whack, and they could be a lot more raw and aggressive, or the songs could go in different directions. They could flow a little more like progressively.
Yeah.
Not saying like Bohemian Rhapsody, but that
Mm.
would be a version of a song that isn't linear all the way through. So I think the AI music definitely achieved that vision. I have other things I do with the music. And this will tie into the other part of AI where it's like, what can I make now that I couldn't make before? What are areas that I either see missing as a business opportunity or
Yeah.
for what has been like a defect in the art that I've been making up to this point in the videos. So on the business end, I had worked a summer in a kindergarten
Mm.
and we watched a lot of TV of kindergarten music and it was all very insipid. It was
Yeah.
really bad. It was as cheap as it could get. And the reason why I think is that the market had said kindergarten music is for 5-year-olds. Who cares? And so, like that, they did not put production into it. And I was just getting to learn Suno last year, so I'm like, okay, well, let's get some educational songs, but have them sound like '90s alternative,
Yeah.
or or drum and bass or pop punk, like Blink 182 type stuff. And it was very easy to do. In fact, if you were not writing the lyrics yourself and sort of like thinking about all of the moments, AI can do that for you, of course. And if you wanted to write something educational for kindergartners, there's enough material out there that it is unlikely to get that material wrong. It did in
Mm,
one, I did a song about insects and it listed spiders
yeah.
amongst the insects, which I mean, I fixed it, but you know, so I made a whole album of kindergarten kids music, alternative, but still building the YouTube channel around that.
Yeah.
But hey,
Is that sort of your niche that you're going for with the AI production?
um, my my niches are imaginative, expressive. I operate in pop art as much as like the fine art museum world
Yeah.
and also imaginative surrealism and dreamlike aspects. So equivalent artists, of course, far more successful than me, but Guillermo del Toro, the filmmaker,
Yeah.
he makes works that are very lush and well crafted, but he's using pop genres. So he did Blade 2 and Hellboy. He did Pacific Rim. He's done Pinocchio. He's got Frankenstein coming out. Shape of Water is the creature from the Black Lagoon. He's worked in noir with
Yeah.
Nightmare Alley and gothic romance with Crimson Peak. But you never get the sense that this is just like a pop art form that's thrown out there because something's popular and let's just make like a knockoff on it and let's not even try
Mm,
and craft it and care about it.
yeah.
And you know, you could look back and say a lot of the art that we celebrate today, I don't know, Marvel Comics or something. There's definitely a commercial drive for that, but there's been plenty of super artistic, uh, not chasing the dollar, but willing to be innovative material. I
Mm,
think the most recent that I could point to is the two Spider-Verse movies, the animated ones
okay.
that have a lot
Mm,
of like hip hop and street art and really unique animation.
yeah.
You have seen either of those?
Yeah, I think I've seen both of them. I think I've seen
Yeah,
both of them.
they're stunning in a technical level, in a storytelling level.
Yeah. Mm.
I
Yeah,
would take a lot of
I
inspiration.
remember the graphics was really out there, really high level.
Yeah. And then prior to that, you could say something like the early Pixar films, the first 10, 15 years of Pixar,
Yeah.
which was also a technology that people were like, well, this can't be soulful. No, nobody's, everything looks like it's plastic, you know, these
Yeah, yeah,
CGI.
it was quite artificial outlook from, when we first sort of laid eyes on it. It's just like, you know, it does make you
Right.
wonder to begin with. So yeah, you do have a point there.
And that's why they did Toy Story first, is because they couldn't emulate the human characters as well as they could the, you know, plastic characters, and then going into like
Mm,
Bugs Life and Cars, and up until basically Incredibles, I think was the first one that had a lot of human
yeah.
characters. There is a human character. There are a few in Toy Story, but it's they generally don't look that good
Is
compared.
that somewhat of an advantage of using AI? The quality is always consistently high, but you're able to be diverse with it, what you're
Yeah.
looking.
So in the case of that kindergarten music project, it's got videos. It's being a YouTube channel. It's being entirely generated by one person. If I was to make the amount of videos and content, and again, I haven't fully launched it yet, but it needs to
Mm,
have about 50 in my estimation before I put it out and start, you know, getting it circulated amongst the educational people to like show in their classrooms. But it would have been 4 or 5 years of work that I did in a few months. And
I see what you mean. The
and it's so
workload.
efficiency. Efficiency is number one.
Yeah.
Number two is there's things that you just couldn't do that you can do with AI. And to give you an example, I do use it a lot as a parts factory for animations. Um, I'm doing a series of Marvel mashup things right now, and there's characters who have maybe like a pumpkin for a head. So you can get a
Okay.
photograph of a jack-o'-lantern and then throw it
Yeah.
into Adobe Firefly. And what would you like this photo to do as a video? And so I have it
Mm,
opening its mouth and cackling. It has rotten teeth and it turns to the camera.
yeah.
And it's just taking like a simple stock image of an eyeball that's facing a profile to you. Now you can have it spin, you can have it look down,
Mm,
it can animate in ways that look realistic, but
yeah.
I do 100% believe that you should not just take what comes out of the generator and then put it up on the wall or like put it out in the world. You have to do
Yeah.
extra production on top of it, if only because a turning eyeball. Oh,
Sorry, that was
sorry.
my laptop.
It's okay. A turning eyeball is not gonna achieve you anything in your goals. Is like, look at what a intelligent, creative person I am, or look what I can do for you. I can turn an eyeball. It's actually going to be pretty basic amongst all the creatives out there. It's
Yeah.
like, what can you do with the turning eyeball? And also, I do think like more music snobs would listen to something that comes out of Suno and say, well, like, well, it's really compressed, or the
Mm,
vocals are higher than the drums, and I agree with that. But I also know how to find the BPM and key and play instruments on top of it and do additional production. And then that makes me feel better too. I mean, even the sampling artists I like Maybe Manifesto or the Bomb Squad of Public Enemy or the Native Tongues had Prince Paul producing them, and it was
yeah.
always like a really good collage of multiple sources.
Yeah.
And whenever I've seen a sampling or an AI artist or whatever you want to call it, whenever I've seen something that I didn't like, it was because they didn't collage very much. They just kept to one thing. Like, thankfully, he's gone down, but Puff Daddy, Diddy, would
Yeah.
just he would do a song like "I'll Be Missing You," and it would be entirely the Police, "Every Breath You Take," with just him
Mm,
saying a couple, and that I can't
yeah.
take that. So it's not clever or creative in the ways that so many other people have worked on it in the past.
Yeah. I mean, for him, I would say that's a business person, not necessarily an artist trying to do art sort of thing. And I suppose, he's a brand in himself, so it just made sense him just showing up and just doing something, not necessarily at a high
Mhm.
level, but just doing something, you know. So yeah, as obviously he's coming from an artist viewpoint, it doesn't seem like much, and it really wasn't, I don't think. But in the grand scheme of things, as a business person, it was. You get what I mean?
Yeah,
So I suppose it's
there's a
two
big
lens.
gulf.
Yeah,
There's a big gulf between people who are like very smart with their marketing and money and people who are very innovative and creative and like the goal is to pursue that form of excellence. So I'm much further on that art side, but I also have lived long enough and experienced enough and gone through college and all these other
mm,
things that cost money that I realized like everybody who is unique and innovative, there's a market for them. It might not be the market they think.
yeah,
It might not just be like you did this really cool thing. Now everybody's going to give you money for it, but maybe you learned a skill or you learn to use AI in a soulful way, quote unquote soulful, because I think that word gets thrown around too much, and we don't
yeah,
we uh we misappropriate it to something that's entirely handcrafted, but digital technologies are as handcrafted as knives and lathes and all the old school type of stuff cavemen worked with. Anyways, what maybe because that skill, now you're, for lack of a better term, a thought leader or an
mm,
influencer in that
yeah,
realm. And then you get sponsored by a company and you go around and teach people how to use their product in these innovative and somewhat like humanistic ways, or how to like make it into a parts factory.
yeah,
Your AI generator is not the end product. It's a parts factory for your your stuff. You can be like Spider-Man and Tony Stark in the Marvel movies where they design the suits looking at a hologram, they spin it around, they say, okay, add this, change that material and stuff, and then it basically gets
Yeah,
3D
yeah.
out. So,
I think yeah, you're right. I think it does give the artist so much more tools to sort of innovate. Um, it's kind of like innovating the tools that an artist has at his disposal to sort of create the vision that is in their head, or maybe even just the realization of it. I think that's a big thing because sometimes even you might hear I've read about people back in um, the days of Einstein, etc., etc. They had this vision, but they never had the tools to create the vision that they had because of the time they lived in. I suppose it would probably be the flip of the coin for somebody in this day and age where um, they might not necessarily know what they want to create in terms of artistically speaking, but with these tools, you're more able to sort of realize the vision because they're so advanced, you know. So
yeah.
it's a really tricky and interesting thought. Um, we're running low on time, but I want to ask you one more question. Something, if there was one advice you would like to give a budding artist, especially in this day and age, what would that be?
I think it's really important to change who you are over time and reflect, what's going on in your life. And a lot of the young artists, because I'll teach high school or online classes from time to time, and they approach what they're doing like what they're doing now is what they're always going to be doing, And if they do any social media, they think that locking into a particular look or style right now is what they need, that's the way to be successful. I don't think locking into anything is good at all. I mean, you're committing to things that you might um, feel foolish about in 10 years time, I think
At
every
that
early
age,
photo
yeah,
edit I
possibly.
did was, yeah, or like if we're musicians, we look at our early songs and we're like, you know,
Yeah, I
your
was young.
your your life is constantly forming new things all the time. Every year should be different for you, you know, and sometimes some of it's in your control and some of it's not. But if you're like progressing towards being a better friend, a better artist, maybe a better, husband or wife, or a better parent, or
Yeah,
more athletic, or eating better, any of those things, then your art can reflect that. Also, we constantly have new technology at our disposal. Not all of it will speak to every artist, but I think it's worth exploring whatever it is,
yeah.
So VR was a thing that I looked into, and I tried making quite a bit of VR painting, and even had the idea you could do a cool VR film where,
Mm,
because you can navigate around your creations there.
yeah,
But long story short, the physical experience of having a VR headset
yeah.
it's too heavy. I know they've had lighter ones come out since the Oculus, but it just was something that didn't really speak to me. And the other things like Procreate Dreams being on the
Yeah.
iPad, it's portable. I go to the ocean, go on public transport, I get all my stuff done. And my animations, if I wanted to, now have theme songs for a superhero character, it can be created within less than, a few minutes. And
Mm,
I have a fully produced theme song with lyrics relevant to that. So don't lock yourself. Don't ever consider that you're fully formed and you're finally happy or you're finally who you are and now you can present yourself to the world. I mean, the counter to that is that people will like wait way too long. And then 10 years will pass and they haven't done anything,
yeah.
They were like
True.
waiting for the
True.
ducks to be in the right row, and there's no such thing as the ducks being in a right row.
Yeah.
They'll never be
Doesn't
lined up
exist.
perfectly. It's better just be authentic yourself, put out what you're making on a regular, consistent basis, elevate as time goes on. that old stuff, whether or not you think it was your greatest hit or not, if it's old, put it in a drawer, you know,
Yeah.
cycle it down. If it really connected with a lot of people, if it was like a big hit, if you made a YouTube video that went viral, you know, keep that up. But but in general, it, don't box yourself in is a
Mm.
good thing to say to young creatives.
Yes, I interpret as adaptability, allowing yourself to grow, to make mistakes. Don't overly define yourself in one space because growth has no sell by date. You know, tomorrow is another day, and if you're still here, you might most likely be an enhanced person and somewhat different. So, yes, I like that idea. Okay. Yeah, I think we don't have much time, but it was great. Um, Mr. David Miller, thanks so much for
Great
giving me
talking
some
to
of
you,
your
Alex.
time. I really appreciate what you shared with my audience. Um, but have a good one. Take care, sir.
You too.
Take care.